June 27, 2025. Putin announces a shocking 3-year plan to cut military spending, right after Russia hits 1 million war casualties. Here's why this move could end his regime. It's a stunning reversal from a leader who, not long ago, appeared to have regained his footing. Sure, his special military operation had made Russia the most sanctioned country on the planet, but with China helping to stabilize his collapsing economy and his forces managing to claw back territory in Ukraine, it looked like Putin had weathered the geopolitical storm just enough to maintain his grip on power. Or so it seemed. Now, that carefully constructed image is beginning to unravel. Something is going very wrong on the home front, and it's no longer staying off the battlefield. And the first real crack? It's not showing up in the trenches, but in the budget. It's not normal for a country that just passed the 1 million casualty mark in a war to cut back on military spending. But that's exactly what Putin just said he would do. On June 27th, he announced a 3-year plan to reduce the money going to the Russian armed forces. According to him, the reduction will start next year. He didn't pass up the chance to throw a few rhetorical jabs NATO's way. The Western observers were quick to roll their eyes. Normally, they'd be right to doubt him. But this time feels different, and that's what makes it dangerous. When both his economy minister and the CEO of Sberbank publicly warn of a looming recession, even Putin can't keep up the illusion. Like his Soviet predecessors, he only tells the truth when reality is too big to spin. So what forced his hand? Turn back the clock to 10 days earlier. On the 17th, Russia's economy minister, Maxim Reshetnikov, warned that Russia was on the verge of going into recession again. Then, on June 20th, another voice joined the chorus, Sberbank CEO German Gref, who said that a perfect storm could soon barrel down on the Russian economy. Putin only admitted the troubling news because it was already out there. So what's the financial weather forecast like in Moscow? Start by looking far away, to the oil and gas fields deep in the Russian interior. Things out here aren't as great as they used to be, and that's really bad. Oil and gas revenues account for about 20% of Russia's GDP and between 30 and 50% of its federal budget. Now those revenues are in trouble for 2 reasons. First, crude oil prices have hit their lowest level since 2021 thanks to increased production from Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. The decline in energy prices partially ensured that Russia's oil and gas revenue fell by 35% between May 2024 and May 2025. Russia has taxes on the extraction of oil and gas, too, and those revenues are also down sharply. They fell by 28% between April 2024 and April 2025. Russia's Ministry of Finance estimates the country has lost 1.7% in GDP growth because of these developments. That's a big problem when Russia has a war to finance. Artillery shells, tanks, missiles, and all the pensions for dead and wounded soldiers don't exactly pay for themselves. It costs $50,000 a year just to keep one soldier in the field. War-related expenses amount to 6.3% of Russia's GDP in 2025, a third of Russia's entire federal budget. So how do you pay for all that stuff if you're a dictator and your top export isn't selling like it used to? The answer can be found in the way Russia is treating its men. No, not the men being sent out to Ukraine as cannon fodder. Rather, take a look at the ones back home. They're lucky in comparison, but in Putin's Russia, your luck can only go so far. So many men are needed to fill Putin's insatiable demand for manpower in Ukraine that it means the ones left behind in Russia are making much more money than they used to. The unemployment rate is only 2%. That can only mean one thing: average wages are up a lot. They rose 15% in just a month to 97,375 rubles between April and May 2025. It all sounds great. See a headline like that, and you might think that the war is making Russia a pretty good place to work. There's just one problem. Russian workers aren't getting more rubles, not because they're more productive, but because their leader is claiming a trophy nobody wants in order to finance his war. When it comes to the yearly inflation rate, Russia is now the world's gold medalist, with a 9.9% rise in prices between May 2024 and May 2025. Things are so bad that Russia's central bank has set a yearly inflation target of 4%, twice what the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank considers to be good form. Those higher wages for Russia's workforce? It just means that there are more rubles chasing goods and services in a civilian economy that can't grow nearly as fast thanks to war expenditures and sanctions. So there's only one direction that prices can go. Just go around and talk to the people in Russia and they'll tell you about it, though not all of them are responding in the same way. Some are putting on a brave face. Older ones will say that there's nothing compared to the post-Soviet economic chaos of the 1990s. But others are more honest. They complain that they can't even afford potatoes or cherries now. Even bread is getting hard for ordinary Russians to reach. Prices have gone up by 35% since their leader decided to launch the special military operation, and by 14.6% in just the last year. How's the Russian government responding to this? One way is with a measure that's been a failure since the Roman Empire struggled with inflation: price controls. Moscow's already done that with eggs, so now Russians don't get to eat as many of the eggs you or me are used to. Go shopping in Russia and you might consider yourself lucky if you come across a carton of actual eggs. A cheap liquid egg product has emerged instead. Now the same thing is happening with bread. Well, it's not quite the same. The bread is at least still solid, but the stores are now selling it in the form of a single slice cut in two, put in a plastic bag, and priced at 23 rubles. There are videos of the phenomenon going viral on social media. That's the reality for people in Putin's Russia now. The most recent inflationary blow comes from new housing and utility increases. The bills went up by 12% starting on July 1st. No word on price controls there yet. As Russians have seen clearly, price controls don't work to control inflation. High interest rates do, and they're seeing those too. So the Bank of Russia has decided to provide relief, sort of. In June 2025, it made the decision to cut interest rates from 21% to 20%. For Russia, keeping rates this high is probably a necessity. Who knows how high inflation would have gotten otherwise? Putin isn't likely to, but in trying to solve one problem, he's only creating another. Since interest rates are so high, Russia's civilian businesses just can't make the investments that they used to, and existing enterprises are much less profitable. Remember those bakeries that need to raise the price of bread? Well, these are the types of businesses that are particularly vulnerable to high interest rates because they run on such narrow profit margins. They can't afford to take any new loans with interest rates so high, especially when the cost of raw materials, labor, and transport has gone up. So the only way they can stay in business is raise prices for lower quality, cost-cutting products. The problems in Russia's economy don't stop there. There's another new price that these businesses and workers need to pay as well, and unlike interest rates, it won't do anything to help with inflation. Russia isn't a country that's used to persistent large budget deficits, but that's what it's been dealing with since the war started. Deficits amounted to 2.51% of GDP in 2023 and 2.25% in 2024 as war spending ramped up. The deficit is projected to shrink to 1% of GDP this year, though, but only because the Ministry of Finance just implemented sweeping tax increases. For the first time, the country has a progressive income tax. There are 4 brackets, starting at 15% for those earning at least 2.4 million rubles per year and ending at 22% for those making over 50 million. Corporate taxes were also raised from 20 to 25%. The new taxes could, in theory, help to ease inflationary pressures, but that wasn't Putin's objective. That money is going out, and we all know where it'll wind up. More spending on the military, meaning more money in the economy, meaning higher prices anyway, all while businesses have less money to invest in creating new wealth. So Russia's civilian economy is in pretty dire straits. But Russia isn't just sitting there taking these economic hits passively. Putin's got another card to play, one that Western intelligence has been scrambling to shut down for months: sanctions evasion. And Russia's gotten frighteningly good at it. Think of it like this: you're trying to starve someone out, but they keep finding secret tunnels to smuggle in food. That's exactly what Russia's been doing with Western technology and critical components. And the scale? It's massive. About 70% of machine tool imports and 90% of microelectronics imports to Russia arrive from China. We're talking about the exact components Russia needs to build tanks, missiles, and maintain its war machine. But here's the twist: China isn't supposed to be selling this stuff to Russia directly. So how's it happening? Welcome to the world of shell companies and midnight logistics. Since at least summer 2024, officials at a bank in Kyrgyzstan have been coordinating with Russian officials to implement what can only be described as a financial laundering operation that would make a drug cartel jealous. In January 2025 alone, the United States sanctioned hundreds of enablers spread across multiple countries. These aren't just a few rogue companies. We're talking about massive international networks specifically designed to keep Putin's war machine running. Armenian exports to Russia tripled in 2022, reaching $2.4 billion. In 2023, they rose by 43%, hitting a historical high of $3.4 billion. Armenia suddenly became a major exporter of high-tech equipment? Come on, we all know where the gear is really coming from. Kazakhstan saw similar spikes. Trade with Russia reached $27 billion in 2023. Exports of nuclear reactors and mechanical devices soared tenfold. Optical instruments and medical equipment grew fivefold. Every time the West shuts down one pathway, Russia opens three more. But here's the catch, and this brings us back to Putin's budget crisis. Thanks to the unprecedented sanctions regime, Russia is spending a fortune to work around restrictions. What used to cost $100 might now cost $300 or $400 through these elaborate shell company networks. That's money that could have gone to soldiers' salaries, equipment maintenance, or economic development. Instead, it's disappearing into the pockets of middlemen in Cyprus, Kazakhstan, and Armenia. The cat-and-mouse game escalated dramatically this year. Treasury Department actions in 2025 have targeted everything from Chinese microelectronics suppliers to Turkish logistics companies to Swiss financial facilitators. Russia's response? Even more complex schemes involving third-party banks and cryptocurrency transactions. It's working, sort of. Russia is still getting critical components, but it's bleeding money to do it. And when you're already hemorrhaging cash on high interest rates, inflation, and war spending, these evasion costs are becoming unbearable. So, with his civilian economy in shambles and sanctions bleeding him dry, Putin needed yet another trick up his sleeve. Don't worry, Putin has another answer for that, or at least he thought he did. He's taken to manipulating the ruble to stabilize Russia's finances. Russia's currency has been on a wild ride since the invasion began. You probably remember the early days in the war when the ruble tumbled to its weakest recorded exchange rate against the US dollar. On March 10, 2022, 135.8 rubles equaled $1. Something needed to be done, so Putin came to the rescue with the magic show. His bag of financial magic tricks included those high interest rates, a mandate that exporters convert a certain percentage of their hard currency into rubles. The mandate started at 80%, forcing foreign customers to pay for Russian energy products in rubles to create a baseline demand for its currency and strict capital controls. The government banned brokers from selling foreign-owned securities like corporate shares in Russian companies and government bonds to prevent a collapse in prices. But these efforts were highly specific. Putin's goal isn't to strengthen the ruble for its own sake. A weak ruble is actually one of Russia's best friends. It means that exports, especially energy, well, let's be honest, it's pretty much just energy, are more competitive. So the goal of Putin's magic show was to prevent a complete collapse of Russia's currency, but keep it just weak enough for him to be able to sell oil and gas to customers at a price they'd find valuable and keep demand steady. And for a while, it looked like he did just that. Lo and behold, the ruble stabilized at an exchange rate of around 90 to 100 to the dollar between the middle of 2023 and November 2024. Economic growth during that time was healthy and the war machine kept rolling on. But something strange has happened recently. In November 2024, the United States slapped dramatic new sanctions on Gazprombank. Putin had ordered European customers for Russian energy to settle their accounts in rubles through this bank, the last major unsanctioned financial institution in Russia. Not anymore. The bank could no longer handle transactions with any entities that had a relationship with America's financial system. The news sent the ruble's value tumbling again between November and January, back to over 100 rubles to a dollar. So Putin seemed to reverse course. He said that his few remaining European energy customers don't have to pay for their product in rubles through Gazprombank anymore. Instead, they could pay in a way that was suitable for both the Russian supplier and the foreign buyer. But that's not the strange part. The ruble did indeed recover from this latest collapse, just not in the way that Putin wanted. Look at the chart. The ruble didn't return to the stable trend seen in 2023 and 2024. Instead, it's now stronger than at any point in the last 2 years. Remember when we said that there was a second reason why Russia's oil revenues are in trouble? This is it. In fact, when it comes to currencies in 2025, Bank of America says the ruble is actually your best investment, with gains of over 40%. Why? Well, the US dollar weakened, but Putin can't just lay the blame on the Americans this time, at least not privately. The high interest rates coming from his military spending spree are now helping to do that too. Russian businesses have little choice but to sit on their rubles now, which lowers demand for foreign currency, and those capital controls Putin put in place to keep the ruble strong are now starting to work too well. What's going to happen when you force exporters to bring part of the money they earn abroad back into the country and convert the foreign currency into rubles? Naturally, the ruble strengthens due to the demand, and then the next round of exports gets less competitive. Russia may have bounded out of its war recession by April 2023, but that's now starting to look like a sugar high fueled by the likes of China taking advantage of cheap Russian energy prices. Now that there's not as much demand, the cracks in the foundation are starting to show. Russia's economic growth has slowed sharply. The average GDP growth over the first 4 months of 2025 was only 1.1%. It was 5.3% over the same period in 2024. Putin vows that he won't let the Russian economy enter another recession under any circumstances. But how can he keep his word with all these problems piling up? There are only 3 realistic choices. He can end the war, apologize for everything, and give Ukraine its territory back. That might reset relations with the West and get the sanctions lifted. But he probably doesn't want to do that because it would also mean he'd take a permanent Siberian vacation or get exiled to China. That's probably the reason why he again said that Ukrainians didn't exist as a people and that all of Ukraine was Russia's. Not coincidentally, he said this in the same meeting where he vowed Russia wouldn't go into recession. So option 1 isn't going to happen. Option 2, increase revenues from energy exports to cooperating countries like China, India, and Turkey. But that's something he can't control as easily as he can control the news in Russia that says everything is fine. So on to door number 3, cut spending to get inflation under control. But where to cut? Only one place stands out, and that's the bloated military budget. It's almost certainly not a coincidence that he said he would cut the spending on the armed forces over the course of 3 years, beginning in 2026. That's the exact timeline Sberbank CEO said that the Russian economy would be most endangered. It's also the exact timeline when Britain's Royal United Services Institute said that the Russian military would become seriously degraded thanks to casualties and the exhaustion of usable equipment. That prediction came in February 2024, and it's happening right on schedule. Sure, Russia has proven far more resilient than the West gave it credit for. All the inflation and high interest rates came for a reason. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte had to admit that Russia produces more ammunition than the entire alliance. A lot more. More ammunition in 3 months than NATO puts out in a year. But when it comes to Russia's vaunted tank fleet, things are different. In January 2024, the UK Ministry of Defense estimated that Russia was producing 100 new tanks a month. A year and a half later, Ukrainian security experts estimate that the number has dropped to between 30 and 35 a month. Why? They're watching a piece of media that Putin can't manipulate, the satellite images of Russia's tank facilities and repair shops, and by the end of May, the pattern became undeniable. Far fewer units were coming in for upkeep than there were a year earlier. You can find further proof in the flaming tank wrecks littering the soil of Ukraine. Russia has lost a staggering number of tanks since the war started. The Oryx blog estimates at least 4,059 tanks have been destroyed, damaged, captured, or abandoned based on visually confirmed losses. That's 32% of its total tank fleet. But those losses declined in 2025, even though Russia has been on a costly offensive all year.
Ukrainian security experts estimated that Russia lost between 300 and 400 tanks per month between September and November 2024. As the new year began, the number dropped to between 200 and 240 tanks a month. That isn't because Russia's finally become more competent at using its tanks. Rather, there's just less tanks available for Russia to lose. And Russia's tanks aren't the only things in trouble. Russia just suffered a huge embarrassment. Between May and June, Ukrainian forces damaged 15 air defense systems in Crimea, attacking S-300, S-350, and S-400 units. Dozens of launchers, 15 radar stations, and over 10 control points had all been destroyed in what is supposedly one of the most heavily fortified pieces of land in the world. These are systems that Russia can't replace so easily. The S-400 in particular cost about $600 million apiece. It's not simply a matter of importing the electronic components from China to get around sanctions. Russia simply doesn't have a productive or financial capacity to produce these systems at scale anymore. Otherwise, Putin wouldn't be admitting economic trouble. Missile attacks on Ukrainian cities continue under high intensity, but they won't end the war. Russia's offensive this year looks less like a coordinated strategy and more like a last-ditch effort to grab as much land as possible so that Putin can say he accomplished something, anything for him to stay in power, even if it's far short of his rhetoric. He might be a dictator, but unfortunately for him, long-term realities in the economy and on the battlefield aren't as easy to manipulate as his country's media. With tanks failing, air defenses crumbling, and inflation rising, how much longer can Putin's economy hold out? Tell us in the comments below. Thanks for joining us today, and if you liked the video, please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons. It makes a difference. See you next time.